Hello and welcome to today's episode of the podcast series. I am Zehra Naqvi, Senior Research Associate at South Asia Research Institute for Minorities. We are thrilled to have you with us today for a very important discussion on education as empowerment, transforming the lives of marginalized communities through learning. As you all know, education is a powerful tool that can break the cycle of poverty and discrimination, offering individuals the knowledge, skills, and confidence to improve their own lives and contribute positively to the society. For marginalized communities, the impact of education can be particularly transformative. So today we have the privilege of speaking with Dr. Khwaja Mohammad Ziyauddin, an esteemed academic and advocate for educational equity. Dr. Ziyauddin is the head of the Department of Sociology, Associate Professor and Deputy Dean of Student Welfare at the Schools of Arts, Social Sciences and Maulana Azad National University, Urdu University from India. Welcome, Dr. Ziyauddin. We are honored to have you here today with us. How are you, sir?
Thank you so much. This is my honor to be part of this podcast today. And I'm really very happy to be talking on one of the very important and pertinent topic in South Asia, particularly marginalized communities. Thank you so much for inviting me here.
Great. So to start off, can you please explain the concept of educational empowerment and why it is particularly crucial for marginalized communities?
This is very, very pertinent and very significant to understand. And let me quickly tell and explain that marginalization is more important to understand when we talk of educational empowerment. And when we locate marginalization, that is a process by which a group or individual is marginalized, pushed through the common resources, public resources, denied the rights to participate in public space, in the space provided by the state and civil society, and also getting pushed away from the mainstream activities in socio-cultural political rights. Thereby, this process brings to us to understand that educational empowerment is very, very important. And when you understand that there is a standard and global understanding of marginalizations, we need to also locate how helpless one group or a person would find, how much complex situation one would be into cycle of poverty, cycle of unemployment, cycle of backwardness, cycle of marginalities. All those are very, very important and much more important for any democratic country, democratic society. Thereby, empowerment becomes very important. And for empowerment, again, this is very important that it helps a group of people in a process to enable all those deprived individuals and groups to gain control over their lives, make certain kind of strategic life choices, and which may influenced by the education they get, the kind of educational facilities and provisions it is available to them as a citizen of the country, right? And on those alternatives should be a choice of the citizen, an alternative choice to the people which kind of education are important. And there is nothing bad to talk about that. The resources has to be equally available to every individual. Thereby, empowerment becomes conceptually and practically in both ways very important, and that influence an individual's life world, a group's life decisions, right? And in this context, these two concepts travel to each other, empowerment and marginalization, which I was talking about. Thereby, what you asked, let me quickly in 30 seconds say that education is one of the most strong tool, and that has been there in all progressive countries in society, across the religion, across the ethnicity, across the geography. Thereby, freedom to attain education, choices to work, feeling of getting well-beingness, feeling of having a choices of your kind of education that can bring a sense of confidence among the people are very important. And these are the topics which is becoming problematic and complex in South Asia today, where people feel that we are not given choice of having our own education, right? And that can bring justice to their life, that can bring opportunities into their collective life world, that can provide them multiple space in terms of getting proper skills and then kind of upliftment we talk about. And those are all contextual to talk about which community, how do we talk about. But theoretically, these are some important parameters that we need to carefully examine and say that, what do we mean by marginalization, how empowerment is important for the marginalized communities, and what would education bring into the life of marginalized group. Thereby, we can have the educational empowerment of an individual or any community or group per se.
True.
This becomes very important to us.
Yes. Thank you so much for explaining it so well. So the next question is, what are the major challenges that marginalized communities face accessing quality education, and how can these be addressed?
Yes, very, very important and significant question. What has been happening and what is the trauma for academia today is that we talk a lot about the potential challenges we have in the life of marginalized communities. But when we read the history of the life of marginalized communities, we find that it is not coming from the people themselves. No, until unless we do not note down the experiential life world of any marginalized communities, it is very difficult to reach them, right? So there is a theoretical down theory. You may bring a lot of resources in the name of marginalized group to say Dalit, Adivasi, religious minorities, linguistic minorities. But do we really think that these demands have been coming and generated by the community? This is a very important question. In India, Dalit movement, for example, is one such classic example where Dalits demanded that let us allow to write life world about our own selves, right? Our experiences are more important than what you talk about me. It apply to many other marginalized groups. Thereby, challenges are multiple, challenges are complex, and it is becoming cyclical in nature. Let me quickly take some of the challenges in terms of when we look at marginalized communities. Exclusion. Exclusion today is very, very, very powerful tool, powerful concept, and powerful understanding in the global South itself. So exclusion is something which is a kind of process bringing into the life of people where people do not have access to participate in their educational rights, political benefits, gender rights, and all those rights which is available even as a citizen of any country, right? So challenges are very important to be identified on the basis of socioeconomic barriers. For that, poverty is a very strong challenge, and that has remained for decades to the marginalized communities. That bring a lot of problem in the form of child labor. Child labor, people do not like to talk today. 20, 30 years back when we were child, people were fascinated writing, talking about child labor. But the problem of child labor has never been minimized or reduced to the margin. It remains to the core of any industry you talk about. It only becomes a problem when that comes to the class consciousness of any society or community we talk in modern India. Therefore, socioeconomic barriers are in the form of poverty, child labor, gender disparity, inequality on the basis of caste and religions, which is apparently a very important barricading into the life of when we talk about the challenges. You have another very important and demonstrated area that we call of discriminations. And we have, for example, I would refer some of the studies in Indian context. There is a study which talks about, mothering a child, and this is a field-based study in one of our national capitals, a school. And this study brings that how in the process of socializations, children find themselves secluded within the very, very modern and posh convent schools in India, right? And how it is happening. What are the phenomena that brings into the life of small young children that, yeah, we belong to a different religion? That was not the case for long back, for long time in this society. You do have a study in 2007, slightly old, but very important study by Professor Khwaja. Yeah, and that study also brings that there has been discriminations in the government-run institutions. You also have studies showing on the basis of caste and gender in Indian context, where some of the very pertinent data shows that you can quickly see that why this discrimination takes place. So caste is one important marker there, religion is another important marker there. Caste, religion, along with gender becomes much more powerful here. And those studies show important. I have been part of some of the research which brings a lot of gender-based disparities within minorities and between minorities are also found visibly in the data. The third important factor, I'll tell you, lack of resources are very important. There are insufficient funding, which will lead to poor infrastructure. That will lead to lacuna in the educational infrastructure. Good and trained researcher, good and trained teachers, and this mismatch is very important for making any society very powerful in terms of educational upliftment. There has been systematic deprivation in funding and a long delayed administrative apathy into this. These all brings and create multiple forms of challenges to the marginalized communities. Maybe in any country, and I find in my country too, becoming very important, right? And so one would ask, then why you are pointing out so many challenges? We know about these things. What is so new about it? Yes, this is new, but are we really serious to identify those problems and come out with potential solutions? That is more important. People have been trying to, even governments at respective periods are coming out with a lot of solutions. For example, equitable resource distribution is very important, which has not been seen. If we examine the national budget of our country for the last 3 years and several years, you find very clumsy budget allocations in the name of upliftment of minorities, for example. Right? Those questions will be coming slightly later. There is a need of targeted support for marginalized groups. There is also need of inclusive policies, very affirmative and inclusive policies, and systematic reforms to reduce kind of educational inequities and disparities. We find a lot of disparities within the educational institutions that is functioning very well. But when you go deep down into the institution, inside the procedure, you will find, oh, there is disparities on basis of religion, caste, region, and gender all the time. So how do we locate that? But all those are potential solutions that can come out to check those barricades, check those barriers in the life of marginalized communities. And I can list number of reforms that would be very important to bridge the gap between these things. And in 2006, we had such a committee, for example, that was talking about Muslims of India. It brought a lot of fascinating, very practical solutions for upliftment of Muslim marginalized, large lot of marginalized groups in country. They are even much more backward in terms of higher education enrollment today, much more behind from the scheduled caste of India, much more behind the scheduled tribes and other backward communities. That shows that equal opportunities for all communities and marginalized groups are not available. And that has to be seriously taken care by the state, not only by the people.
I agreed with you. I totally agreed with you. Thank you for sharing the reality and the real examples. Meanwhile, I want to ask, can you share some successful stories or example where education has significantly transformed the lives of individuals or marginalized groups, communities?
Yeah, that is true. And it has to be there. One cannot talk all the time about the apathy, helplessness and living into the disparity. There are good stories, there are good ways to handle it. And these all have come only when we have done commendable research about it. Until we do not have data-centric studies, we could not have come. I can give you one very classic example of one of the state where I'm located at the moment, Telangana. In recent times, there is this government, started, the state government I'm talking about in the federal structure, started 204 minority residential schools in the entire state, 204. And that came up as one of the very powerful tools to bring back all those people who were standing so far from the benefits of the citizenry rights. So these 204 schools were divided into boys and girls school. Around 107 are the boys schools and 97 are the girls school. And they're all residential school. Just understand. At one go, by one small state, a new state, and targeting one of the group like all minorities, all religious minorities, I would say Muslim, Christian, Sikh, Parsis, Jains, all 6 religious minorities. And thereby, what has happened? We did a lot of field visit. We did a couple of interactions with the students, kids who study there. You find a lot of change. What was the problem? That a poor family lives in the cycle of poverty. Coming out of the cycle of poverty is very difficult. You need at least a hole in the entire cycle of that. That hole is not coming so easily into their life. This school is one of the hole where they can come out from the cycle. Thereby, once you put your child into this school, the children are taken care by the state government, administrative mechanism. So almost thousands and thousands of students are coming into it. Yes, people found it is very difficult to get students from minorities because minorities were not really ready to send their kids into residential schools. The whole old theory that more hands, more earning, the what I was referring about child labor. We have a small scale household factories where children contribute into their family income. So at one point, you don't have children coming into school, but gradually it has picked up. Why? The research is showing that this is going to prove and this is becoming very much important tool to change the life of minorities in Telangana state. And thereby, all those Telangana minority residential schools where they are given counseling, they are given, all kinds of exposure trips, they are given proper coaching training as well for clearing law exams, clearing medical examination, clearing engineering exams. There is something very traditionally important in Indian society that if you qualify as a doctor, become a physician, become a doctor, and then become a lawyer, you become very successful in the society. There's something else to debate about. But traditionally you get respect from these professions. So parents are thinking, oh, my child will become something so A and B, C. Thereby, children in these schools are coming in large number. Almost in 33 districts of the state, schools are located. And I am told that some of our students are teaching in these schools. They say that these are going to bring revolutionary change if there is no policy, pull back into this school scheme. I'll give you one more example quickly. In one or two states, there are reservations to the backward minorities, not all minorities. In the period when they were given reservations in the admission process, in the in sector of school, public school, etc., the data shows that there is a sharp change into the educational attainment level among the minorities in these states. And in one of the interviews and I was talking about, which was published in The Wire and South First, one find that there is a sharp difference of southern India and North India. What we call here is Hindi belt, and then southern India. There's a sharp difference in terms of a school attainment level among minorities and in general, right? Gross enrollment ratio, higher educational enrollment, both are very different. And this is truly because in these two states, the priorities are different. Southern India is much more developed, economically better off, much more, currency comes from the Gulf economy, European countries, which is lesser in the northern India, in the belt. Thereby, poverty becomes much more troublemaker into their life. And so you can't send your children to school education, very, very costly today. This is becoming much more costlier when somebody is earning annual income, right? So these stories are very important. Now, what is the duty of researcher and students? The duty is to do a lot of research into these studies. There are also some of the successful stories of the Ministry of Minority Affairs, which used to function till recently. They had skill development schemes where women will be given skill training, minority women I'm talking about. There will be skill training and kind of handy loan, kind of some placements. And I found some of them doing very well in the city of Hyderabad. Thereby, I'm pretty sure that without the support of states, the governments, it is very difficult to run with the pace of the most affluent classes of the society. And that is true for our society too, right? Thereby, it is very important to replicate all those success stories. I'll give you one example. One of the most backward state of India, Bihar, one of the most educationally very backward states. The government which is ruling there, they started a scheme few years back, cycling scheme, to bring gender disparity, to patch the gender disparity. So all girls who are enrolled into schools will be given free bicycle, I mean, so that they can ride themselves, reach to the school. It will ensure timely attendance. It will ensure parents are not, burdened that they have to drop their children into schools. It also minimizes the harassment of girl child walking down to schools. On the way, they get a lot of harassments. Thereby, some of the people from other states went to this state and tried to study that. What is this scheme that was very, much talk? And recently, I was traveling some of the districts there. I found, yes, it is working. You can see in the barren, deserted roads, bulk of group of girls cycling themselves towards school. That is amazing. So these schemes can come only by the state governments, the federal governments, not by the people themselves. They're not capable to do those innovative initiatives. What innovative we could be as a parent, as a family, we could be innovative in terms of understanding the need of the children and sending them to the school as per our income status, as per our classes. That's it. More than that, it's the responsibility of the state to do that. And thereby, all these stories are important to learn every day when we read them in terms of this function, in terms of its success, in terms of its... And last point in this, I want to add that we have to remember the budget allocations. Has there been increase into the budget every year? That is very important. We really do not worry about that. If there is an increase in the budget allocation every year, that would also tell that this is becoming successful. Otherwise, this becomes just a glamorous scheme which may be launched by any respective government for a time being. Right. So as a researcher, I can say that in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, to hear the stories and learn about the real world experiences. Thank you so much, Professor. So let's move forward. So how can educational institutes and government policies better to support marginalized communities in achieving education equity?
Yes, thank you. This is also very important and connected to what we were just discussing just now. And somebody would be very unhappy that why I'm talking so much about the government. I'm talking about the government because we have chosen the government. We have realized that democratic governments are much more useful till now that can benefit everyone equally. Thereby, government policies becomes very important. What kind of policies you have? Does those policies addresses every group of people who stand and who is those groups who are in the hope of getting some kind of support by the government? This is very important. So educational equity is important, but how do you address that? For that, what was happening for a long time that the India, for example, was fighting with poverty, with rural backwardness, lot of hunger and droughts initially. The moment you could overcome those challenges, we thought that, yeah, we are able to feed our people, we are able to feed the poor who are not able to earn every day. There was a possibility that, look, now it is important to bring education into their life. And thereby, in 1986, we have one national education policy, which remains to be very, very important, which remains to be very significant. And we have another new national education policy 2022 2020. These two policies have become very important to bridge the gap between the haves and haves not. Now, who decide about haves not? Are haves not able to voice themselves? Do we have any mechanism that will tell that haves not, who do not have anything, will be able to reach to the haves? This is very difficult. That's very difficult. So thankfully, some of the think tanks, some of the governments thought that there is a need of bridging out this gap, and they did some lot of research work, did some policy commissions, and those recommendations are very important. Thereby, you have a lot of initiative. I'll give you an example. We had a right to education, right? Right to education becomes a fundamental right in India. So now every child, for example, has to be given school education until certain age of time. So 6 to 14, if you are any child who is roaming around during the school hour, it is the district administrator who is responsible. He or she has to be accountable to the under this act. Now, therefore, there the entire machinery of a district is very active that no child should be roaming without school during school days. Now, even the private schools were asked to admit some proportion of their total vacancies and put those children into their schools. This provision was very difficult. This is one of the most progressive provision in India because child labor continued for years, and you have thousands and thousands of research, nothing happened. But one single act could minimize that children cannot work during day hour. Otherwise, the district head will be responsible. Now, so when machinery is active, administrative machinery is active, people will find that no, this is very important to us. This is one of the policy, I'll tell you. We have a policy of National Rural Employment Guarantee. Now, when government is giving employment guarantee of minimum days to every poor population in the countryside, parents have a feeling, look, at least I have an earning. Why not we send our children to the school? They will get something, and in the next generation, they may not work like I am working as a laborer in countryside. Thereby, this policy also brought a lot of change into the school. Today, even I was locating one of the study which Dr. Khalid Khan has done, and in 2024, this talks about the status of quality school education among Muslims in India, for example. And this report, I was part of the debate when it was released 2-3 months back. This report also talks about that, and Khalid argues with the report of all the statistics are the Government of India statistics. Now, enrollment is much more better. Almost universal rate of enrollment is being achieved across the classes, across the marginal groups. But what happens when they reach to class 10? What happens to their when they are able to reach and they should reach to higher secondary? That is very important. And who will tell us? This is again the research and the data by the Government of India. So the report finds that the highest dropout among marginalized communities in India is first among Muslims. Then you have Adivasis, and Dalits, then other backward communities. Now, what will happen? With this data, you will realize that educational equity is important to achieve, and to achieve that, we have to find those mechanisms that children do not drop in these schools, right? I'll give you another micro example. In our city and some of the cities of the country, we find that there is a mismatch of maid selections in marriages. Why? Because the girls are becoming more and more educated, whereas the young boys are being dropped, they are sent to work, they are sent to earn for the family. And the moment the years they spend in terms of earning from the very early age, there is educational mismatch between the two. So the girls are not finding match. And if they are getting married, those marriages are not really successful. marriages between the equal classes are more successful. It's across the community, across the globe. Thereby, there are certain problems if you do not address the entire concerns as a whole. If you and we in the recent the data of the government of India, we find that the girls' enrollment in some of the cities in India have increased much more than boys. And this is going to a problem. Till recently, we were talking about women's backwardness in higher education, right? So, what the state will do? We have to have very important mechanisms in terms of not allowing children to drop from higher educations, higher school educations. We should have mechanism wherever there are dropouts, the district administrations should be responsible again that they should bring back those children into the school across the community, whosoever it is. It's not only about minorities and marginalized group, but even for the others who are better off. Thereby, this will have a much more equitable social situations, and it helps us to achieve much more educational equity. It will have much more parity in a sense, and that is my concern that this mismatch is going to be a much more sociological concerns in the years to come. And I work much more on Dalit and Muslims. I find it is troublemaker because you already have a lot of trouble in terms of finding a mate, and these new trends which is coming up, which will be more troubling to us. Yeah. So,
noted the important points. Thank you so much. And linking them to our discussion, as you are a researcher and teacher, what innovative approaches or programs has Maulana Azad National Urdu University implemented to support the education of marginalized groups?
Oh, very interesting. And this comes to the institution where I also find myself. This is one of the innovative programs you mentioned. This comes, for example, this Maulana Azad National Urdu University is only university in this country, which is Urdu University per se. And this comes out of a very long effort by the people. And the people worked hard to have one Urdu university in the country. And for a long time, it was not working out, but there was a Gujarat committee, the former Prime Minister of India. Before that, he was heading this committee, and this committee recommended that IQ Gujarat committee that there should be a national Urdu university, and it also recommended national Hindi university in India. And we have thereby this beautiful university coming up. And when it started in 1998, the Parliament of India gives mandate in 3 numbers. One, that this university should be promoting Urdu through learning. So second mandate was that giving educations to women. So women education was the second important mandate. And third was that vocational training to the people who come to this university. Now, you will be surprised and people will be happy to know that this is the only university where almost more than 60 to 70% students come from marginalized group. Most of them, majority of them are first generation learners. They have never been able to go into any national or better university. So when you see this large crowd coming to this university, this is going to be a revolutionary change in next 1 decade. This is just almost 25 years we have finished. And then last almost 20 years, what I have seen is that we have reached to the every corner of the country, every pocket of the country where Urdu speaking populations are there. Thereby, the whole idea that people do not talk about Urdu is something superficial. It's not about talking and knowing. Urdu was a language for everybody across the community. But then what happens to those who read themselves at their primary level in Urdu? Is it that the state should deprive them? Or somebody studying Tamil, Hindi, Bengali, or Marathi? Everyone should be given equal space and chances. So this university brings a kind of revolutionary platform for those who wanted to have women's education. And you will be very happy to hear, and the audience will be happy to know that we have a large number of women faculty in the university. The large number of girls are coming forward. And when the girls join this university, parents comes in bulk and say that we are so happy to see this university that our daughters will be happy, they'll be safe, and they'll be getting quality educations. And that too into their own languages. And in contrary, a bulk of the university teachers are from very reputed universities across the country and globally. They have joined here, they are bilingual, they have 3 languages knowledge. So it's not that our students who are first generation learners are only reading and studying in Urdu. They do very good in English, they do in other languages. And then when they are able to, if some of them are joining for doctoral programs, PhD programs, they write thesis in English. So imagine somebody coming from Urdu medium schools from madrasa, both the states, we have recognized madrasas in India where university consider their degrees equivalent to some Great. So students from those Urdu medium background writing thesis in English is a revolutionary change into their life. And they are very confident. They are much more empowered. So the real empowerment takes place when you bring this change into the life of a family, of a group. And Manu, Maulana Azad National Urdu University, not exists only in one city. We are spread almost in the 14 states of India. We have 7 educational colleges. We have 2 undergrad colleges in 2 different states. We have various polytechnic and ITI colleges. We have KG to PG scheme now. So the university's vice chancellor has started from class 1 to class PhD. If somebody wants to come into the university will be able to provide in Urdu media. Right. These are something which was not really envisioned by the people who would have thought that let us have some university like this. So this is one of the very powerful policy of government of India, and it's centrally run by the central government. So thereby, the funding is also not much more problem. You have a lot of good residential hostels there. And today, when we travel as a teacher to various parts of the country, we find our students in institutions, in corporates, at airports. They are serving. So that makes any marginalized communities feel that the aspiration will not die. The aspirations among the poor, marginalized, backward communities only keeps alive when they find their members to be into better, sector in some places, some locations, which is bringing respect apart from earning, respect, dignity, and that becomes stories. And a good story in ethnography, in sociology, we talk about a good story can build a research thesis. So a good story can also transform the entire community, and that has done in the past worldwide. Thereby, I am very happy to be part of this revolutionary process of change we are able to bring into the life of marginalized. It's a gradual. And with all lot of challenges remains there. Challenges I'll not mention here because to do something innovative, challenge will remain part of your life. So it is true for our university. But government is freely giving lot of support to this university, and thereby it's growing today. Otherwise, in the last 20 years, if you read the history of all new universities in India, you will not find such exponential growth in all the 19 or 20 universities apart from another national university. So that makes a lot of and tremendous effort by the all stakeholders of the university is very important to us. I hope that in fact these stories our ambassador, our pass out will take away and tell all those first generation learners to join hands here. And you will be very happy to know that name the department you will have here. So people cannot imagine in Urdu medium you have every department, almost every department, including computer sciences, being functioning very well. This is very important. And so I hope that such stories will also be reaching to other marginalized communities across the country. That makes a lot of sense to the any nation which wants to grow, which wants to become powerful in the worldwide. Yeah.
Yeah, totally
Yes, Gary.
impressive, I must say. This is very kind. We need more people in education institute like this. And the last question is about what are the recommendations for further initiatives or policies to enhance the educational opportunities and overcome for marginalized communities.
This is very important, and we keep talking about recommendations. There is a very light joke in light note. People say that academicians keep doing a lot of recommendation, and none of them are being taken seriously. This is global phenomena today. But then, despite of those realities, we find that at times policies and policymakers take those research work. Some of the some of the policies globally, we have found that whenever government wants to implement any policy which is useful to their political benefits, they'll pick and use those research data, and it has happened in the past. So we as a researcher and teacher found that let us keep doing and talking about it. Anytime this will benefit to them. Affirmative policies are very important. I was giving some of the examples. I'll give you one example or two examples of the state I'm located and many other states today. There are residential schools. Residential prior to minority residential school, we had SC/ST welfare schools. So for scheduled caste, what we refer today Dalit or Adivasis, then there has been welfare residential schools, and those school children have done tremendous success in their lives. The one of the child went to Mount Everest and broke the record of at the younger age climbing to those. They have qualified various competitive examinations, right? So policies have been there in different states and then at the national level, but those policies have been not consistent, not fully supported across the period of time. If you begin a policy, any affirmative policies, that should sustain for at least 1 decade, 2 decade. Life doesn't change of a family in a year or two. To educate, for example, a child, it needs 10 years, 10 to 20 years of lifespan. That will bring, there is a possibility, not necessarily, there is a possibility to have some social mobility, some vertical mobility into the life, and so bring change into the life of family. So affirmative policies are very important, and that has to come nationally, not regionally or the federal states only. The second important point in the context of which we have found is fellowship. And I'll give you one example here. We had a Maulana Azad National Fellowship in India for the all minority students who wants to do research in higher education. And if I compare myself, I was feeling so bad, upset that at our time there were no fellowships apart from one or two. When you have these Maulana Azad National Fellowship, almost everyone, because we have very few who are coming to higher education from minorities. So anyone who wants to join PhD, they'll have a very good, handsome fellowship. They can live so happily. They can do a lot of good academics. And we used to struggle a lot in our days for surviving to higher education. But then this comparison should be in a sense that these students should benefit much more. But what is happening that the policies are not consistent. Policies are not really, examined carefully. And I learned that a year back, this fellowship, for example, is being scrapped. So you have almost 756 or 800 students from minorities every year joining proportionally in higher education. Imagine. I am sure almost 80% of them now will not be able to continue their research because it was only that fellowship they were doing, and that was national fellowship. So you would have students doing genetic science, you were doing biological sciences in PhD. Muslim in India, Dalits and Adivasis in India are in very difficult financial conditions. They cannot send their children to higher education and afford such. So therefore, these fellowship should be restored, and there should be many more fellowships for all those backward and marginalized communities in terms of sustaining those education. I was just referring that dropouts in higher educations. If you see the data, we have all India survey data for higher educations. The higher you go, the higher education you go, you have more dropouts among minorities, Dalit, Adivasis, and so on and so forth. So this fellowship will retain them into higher education, and this is going to be very important for nation building process. This will definitely contribute a lot. There has to be some unique residential hostel based campuses. If you locate residential campuses in the region which such a committee once upon a time recommended, 90 minority concentrated districts in India, and majority of them, all those 90 concentrated districts were in the largely Hindi states in India. In these states, we consider most backward educationally and economically. So it was spread. Now, if you reach yourself to those backward areas, what will happen? The aspiration will generate. People will think putting their kids into those schools. So that policy has to be revived, kept alive, similar to what we have provision for SC/ST schools. We have to have one KG to PG formula for inclusive education. What is this KG to PG? That the moment any child is put into a school, it should be mandatory for the state to take care of their educational expenses if they are poor, if they cannot. For example, we have already information who are poor, who are not poor. We have data. There is a benchmark who are below the poverty line, who are the above poverty line in India. So there is nothing to worry. There are very, very smart administrative offices from center to village in the country. So you can identify those families, those children. Putting those children who are from poor families into very good schools and the run by the government will really bring a charismatic change into the life of poor, right? So this KG to PG, some of the respective states have done it, and they're doing fairly very good. Telangana, Karnataka, some states. We do have those policies where the state supports them. Now, somebody will say budget allocation is very difficult. Yeah, we have to realize that education is very important. In the last budget, we were seeing just few days back or a week back, budget session in India. There is a small increase, minor increase of budget allocations of, for example, on education, on higher educations, even on minority ministry. Very sad that the Ministry of Minority Affairs is not fully functioning in India right now. At the moment, we do not have an independent minority affair ministry, which has to be there for years. And when you have independent ministry, that will address and cater to the needs of the most poor. The poorest in our society are found among Muslim majority, among scheduled caste, among Adivasis. And if you do not have proper formula for them, they will be always into the trap of cycle of poverty, right? And we have a lot of sociological literacies showing that if you do not come out of any innovative things, economists say that cycle of poverty is something which is a ceiling into the life. So if those ceiling, what will happen? That cycle continues for generations, no, intergenerations. The only hope anytime you have to make a small hole into it, and that small hole can be made by the state, by the government. The moment you make a small hole, people start coming out of those cycle of poverty. And there has been lot many studies showing that the affirmative policies have brought a lot of changes into the life of. We have large number of people doing very good from minorities, from Dalit and Adivasis, only because they could get government public university educations. You know? And I'll give you a very loose example. If somebody wants to study masters in sociology in a very private eminent university, he or she they will pay almost 5 lakh annually, and the same kind of educational quality could be found in a national or state universities with a very meager amount of 10,000 annually, right? Imagine the difference. And this is what we are finding today. So why the state has to think about that, the growing inequality in terms of paying capacity and the demand by the educational institution has to be controlled. If it is not done, the poor will not be able to reach higher educations. They do not have support mechanisms. They do not have income, sustainable income. What is the difference between marginalized and then everyday income or monthly income? The monthly based income families are much more happier globally because at the end of the day, they know on 30th of the month, there will be some fixed amount coming to my account. Whereas a laborer has no guarantee that tomorrow I'll have any amount, any earning or not. So this sense of insecurity into the life and the family will not allow them to send their children to a school or university. Thereby, it is the responsibility of any democratic state to take care of all those backward marginalized and provide a support system, a protective system, some affirmative policies. And we do have successful affirmative policies. What is important that those policies has to be re-examined, revisited, and with an honest funding allocations, which is very important. And those who implement this, the last word I would say that those who implement these policies should be made accountable, that this is your responsibility to implement this policy, otherwise you will be responsible, right? So once the moment you have this responsibility, any scheme will not fail. The scheme will be always successful. And we have seen that. Thereby, I still have a lot of hope that affirmative policies will bring hope and betterment into the marginalized life. And that is the reason we keep talking about it. And this discussion and discourse should be alive, should be working, and should be a healthy sign for any progressive society wherever we live. I think this is what I wanted to say in terms of the area that we need to do a lot about marginalized groups and their educational empowerment in general. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing the recommendations. So it's the end. Thank you so much, Dr. Ziyauddin, for sharing the insight and experiences with us today. Your contribution to this discussion are incredible value, and you provide a clear path to move forward to enhance the educational opportunities for marginalized community. Thank you to the listeners who joined us today, and stay tuned for more discussions. Until next time, take care and stay informed. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.